Douglas Masters comes in. He says, what's the status on Crowder? I've been out of the loop lately. And that sort of takes us to our next segment here. We want to talk about positional battles, and feel free to hop in, in the chat and have this discussion right on with us as I'm blocking some bots in the comment section here. So apologies to anyone in the comment section who sees those bots, but I think the wide receiver competition I want to start with, and it involves Jamison Crowder, because I think, at least to me, heading into training camp, it was Diggs, it was Davis, it was McKenzie, it was Crowder, it was Shakir, and it was Jake Kumaro. That was going to be the sixth. And if the Buffalo Bills were going to keep a seventh guy, it was probably going to be Marcus Stevenson or Tavon Austin based on return abilities. My thought was, if Isaiah Hodgins is going to make this football team, the only shot Isaiah Hodgins had to make the football team was by playing better special teams or within the margin of error of Jake Kumaro on special teams and being a better receiver, which is a lot to ask. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks later, Jamison Crowder just got back to working individual drills today after having some kind of soft tissue injury and missing all but the first training camp practice. Jake Kumaro has missed the last couple of practices. Maybe this has opened the door. If Isaiah McKenzie is the team's slot receiver, if Khalil Shakir, who flashed early in camp but had a really bad day today from what I've heard, can prove to the Bills that, hey, I can be your inside-outside backup. I can be Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis's backup. I could be Isaiah McKenzie's backup. Does that maybe open up a spot for an Isaiah Hodgins or a Marquez Stevenson over a Jamison Crowder, despite the fact that he's still owed a ton? He's owed a lot of guaranteed money, and he's a proven veteran. What are your thoughts? Has this wide receiver battle changed at all to you, or is the six stalking horses still the six stalking horses?
I think the horses are the same. They just may be out of the gates in a different order than maybe how they'll finish. I think that, Crowder's kind of lagged behind here early. McKenzie's kind of pulled out in front. Shakir has kind of been, honestly, what we should have expected in a way, like some ups and downs, but some flashes, good hands. Like, that's kind of what I think we were thinking was going to be the case for him in camp. So, like, no real surprise for me from Shakir. The biggest surprise, obviously, I think, is the flip-flop of McKenzie and Crowder, though I still think it's not enough right now for me to vault someone like an Isaiah Hodgins over a guy like Crowder, especially with the money and especially with the fact that, again, Crowder's back at individual drills. We got a long way to go. He's still, in my mind, the guy that's going to be there. And I think it's just the horses are out of the gate. It's just an interesting, it's an interesting jump out of the gate right now with some of the mix-ups. But I still think it's the same six as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really rooting for Isaiah Hodgins because I love his skill set. I loved his advanced analytics and his SAS statistics and just how productive he was in the red zone in college. But I just don't know if he can't get on the level of Jake Kumaro as a special teamer. There's a spot on this roster for him, unfortunately. Hopefully we can stash him again on the practice squad. But from all the reports, Isaiah Hodgins and Marcus Stevenson have had solid training camps. If that carries over into the preseason, it's going to be, I think, very hard to keep an Isaiah Hodgins on your roster. He might look to go elsewhere where there's more opportunity. That being said, Marcus Stevenson, I heard Khalil Shakir just had an awful day today. So someone said he dropped passes when it was when they were just doing warmups. And, I think what happened to Khalil Shakir today is anyone who's played a sport knows, you're in warmups and you screw up in warmups and then all of a sudden everything just sort of snowballs from there. I think Khalil Shakir might have had one of those days where he dropped an easy one in warmups and then the rest of the day just snowballed from there because he then had to drop in team drills. He was muffing punts. He was bobbling punts in the punt return drills and things like that. Had an all around bad day. And I think that could be opening the door for Marcus Stevenson to make a claim to be wide receiver 7. He's got that return flexibility. He's got speed. He can work inside. He can work outside. He can do a whole bunch of different things. Even if he's not active, he's there as an insurance policy. So I think the one winner of the Hodgins Stevenson debate earlier or this thus far in training camp, this early in training camp, is probably Stevenson, because I've heard his name more, I think, than Tavon Austin. And I really think wide receiver 7 is really, barring injury, the only opening in this receiving core right now. How about the tight end 3 competition? Tommy Sweeney has looked good per reports. We know that he's a coaching staff favorite. Could we see the Buffalo Bills carry 4 tight ends? Gilliam, Howard, Knox, and then Tommy Sweeney. Because that's the biggest question. That's been the biggest question, is how many do the Bills carry? Gilliam looks like a lock. Howard's obviously a lock. Knox is a lock. What about Sweeney? Do you think he's done enough so far in training camp to possibly get the Bills to consider carrying that 3rd tight end / 4th tight end?
Well, they only kept 2 last year plus Gilliam, right? So 3. So at least at the initial 53 man. So it is going to be, you know, a little bit of a divergence from that if they do keep him. And you have to think about where are they going to take away from on the rest of the roster, right? We've talked about the offensive line having injury concerns. Do we need to keep a 10th offensive lineman there? And that maybe takes away from a tight end, kind of not the same, but like you're talking about, someone who can block, someone that maybe is more valuable than having a guy that might not ever see the field much. I'm still kind of in the camp of I would rather only keep 2 tight ends plus Gilliam. So I think Tommy Sweeney's going to make a push. I think the coaching staff's going to really have a hard time keeping him off the roster. It's going to be one of those really tough decisions, knowing the history of Tommy Sweeney on this team and kind of everything he's gone through, and the fact that he has kind of been a fan favorite, not necessarily for his production, but just as a likable guy and an easy guy to root for. But it comes down to production at the end of the day. And are the Bills willing to keep him when they have guys like Jalen Weidermeyer and Quentin Morris who they can put on the practice squad, pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
And honestly, they could put Tommy Sweeney on the practice squad too, probably pretty comfortably if they really wanted to. So I don't know, man. I would only keep the 2 plus Gilliam as of right now.
I'm still shocked. I'm shocked that he's still on. Like that. I'm shocked that he was on the roster for as long as he was last year, and that Bills never brought in really very much in terms of a veteran tight end off the streets. Obviously, I can't go back and look and see who was available. That might have had something to do with it. But I mean, the Bills were like, Tommy Sweeney just has not produced in his NFL career. When he's been out on the football field, drops have been an issue. Staying healthy has been an issue. Obviously, one of those things was out of his control with the COVID stuff. But Adam Shepard comes in and says, "I heard Sweeney is actually doing better than Howard. Unfortunately, the money they paid Howard is going to affect that." The only real report that I saw was that Thad Brown report that I mentioned earlier, and I kind of called BS on that report a little bit because I see Tommy Sweeney has never done anything in this league, and really, OJ Howard has at least had some modicum of success in this league, leads me to believe that what you're seeing on the practice field is not an indication of their true talent level. Now, I do think this coaching staff loves Tommy Sweeney, so I do think that if he really does ball out, the Bills will consider keeping that 3rd / 4th tight end. But in terms of roster gymnastics, I personally would not be in favor of that, because I really would like to keep that extra guy in Marcus Stevenson or that 10th DB or something of that nature.
Or offensive lineman, maybe.
Another offensive lineman over a Tommy Sweeney, but it wouldn't shock me. Jim Wickens comes in and says Weidermeyer over Sweeney. Based on what we're hearing out of camp so far and what people are reporting, Jalen Weidermeyer really hasn't done much to stick out. So that's going to come down to the preseason. Yeah. Jalen Weidermeyer was one of the, top tight ends in the class up until like the combine, and then he fell off a cliff with his horrible testing numbers. So if Jalen Weidemeyer comes out in the preseason and catches 6 touchdowns, I think we even mentioned this last week, like, he catches 4 touchdowns, he gets the attention of some people, gets his clips on SportsCenter. People in the league are going to take notice, and it might be a little harder to place a guy like Jalen Weidemeyer on the practice squad. But right now, it's probably easier to practice squad Weidemeyer than a Sweeney. It's easier to pencil a guy like Weidemeyer onto the practice squad. So I don't think he has that advantage on Sweeney quite yet. But in terms of upside, I think the argument can be made that Weidemeyer's got that higher upside than Sweeney. And Jessica Tennis comes in. Some people just don't want to break up the Buffalo Bills hairband, and that is a fact. That is an absolute fact. All right, the offensive line depth. We just talked about offensive line here a second ago. Brown or Questenberry week 1 at right tackle? What do you think?
God, I hope it's Brown. I mean, he was on the bike today? I think I saw someone say he was riding the bike. Like, look, he's got a month plus to get his affairs in order, so to speak. I'm hopeful it will be Brown by week 1. I think the Bills are going to put him on a plan with that in mind. I think that, yes, they'd love to get him reps against, Vaughn and others to kind of just, make it so he's not really just going cold from his rookie season into year 2 starting. But I think they're going to have the coaching staff in combination with the medical staff is going to put him on a plan with an aim to have him ready by week 1, if not maybe by like the end of the preseason. Right. So right now I'll say Brown. The optimist in me will say Brown.
Yeah, and Douglas Masters comes in and says, how is Spencer Brown doing with his back? That's what you just mentioned, sort of having him on a plan. So he was with the second team on the first day of practice, second team right tackle behind David Questenberry. And then he hasn't practiced with the team since. He's only done individual blocking drills. And then when they're doing team drills, according to Pops Mafia, he's been riding the bike. So it's just tough because he was such an inexperienced player. He lost a whole year to COVID because he was a small school player, and that school, canceled their season. He was reps behind that way. He was such a green. He was so raw. He came from such a small school. Now he's missing most of this training camp. It's really tough for me to try to picture the Buffalo Bills throwing him out there to the fire week 1. So it'll be interesting to see as the weeks progress here and as we get closer to the regular season, whether he starts to get worked in more. I certainly hope so. And this is a team that we didn't think he'd play last year, and the Bills threw him out there. So that could also tell you just how much the Buffalo Bills believe in his raw ability, or don't believe in the guys behind him.
Well, the fact that they put him out there last year as a rookie and stuck with him leads me to believe that they're not going to be afraid to do that again this year. So that's why I'm holding out hope he'll be there in week 1.
Chris Jenke makes a great point too, going back to the Tommy Sweeney thing. The Giants are a team to watch. It might be harder to sneak some guys, especially offensive guys or even defensive guys, because Joe Shane is there, onto the practice. Cam Lewis, I don't know what the New York Giants nickel cornerback situation looks like, but if it's not good and Cam Lewis gets cut, Cam Lewis could end up in New York. Chris Jenke mentions behind Daniel Bellinger, there isn't much at tight end for the New York Giants. Guy like Tommy Sweeney has familiarity with Brian Dable.
Stop disrespecting Ricky Seals-Jones.
One more thing on the offensive line. If you had to bet right now, you're a betting man. It is August 2nd. You had to bet right now. Would you bet 9 or 10 on the offensive line when they cut down to 53?
9. I mean, that's just based on history. I'll go with 9. And that's part of me is being optimistic, right? That the injuries will kind of clear themselves out by, the later parts of August, and they'll kind of be back on track with their guys ready for week 1. So I'll say 9 because part of me also wants them to keep 7 wide receivers in my heart. So I'll go with 9.
Got John Damashi coming in here with the super chat. Nice to see you, John. He says, offensive line has right tackle Brown, who's a bad back. They have a new right guard who was their left guard, and Ryan Bates, also hurt, missing parts of training camp now with a soft tissue injury. Mitch Morse, a new left guard coming off of a car accident with some cracked ribs. Deion Dawkins, and really zero practice together. And Aaron Donald in 39 days Then it's on to Tennessee, who's got, Jeffrey Simmons, Bud Dupree, the other guy whose name I'm blanking on.
Harold Fuller.
Harold Landry.
Or Landry, sorry.
Then you got Jalen Phillips and Christian Wilkins in Miami and Emmanuel Agba. Then you got Baltimore and F.A. Away, Pittsburgh, Cam Hayward, and, T.J. Watt. Kansas City just signed Carlos Dunlap. So, yeah, we actually led the show off with this. We are quite concerned.
Thanks, John, for that. I mean, this is very.
It's a great summation of our concerns.
Very good summation.
You are feeling what we are all feeling right now, and like I said this earlier. It's like the hope is Saffold, Bates, and Brown are back week 1. That's the hope. The reality is it might just be Saffold and Bates. And it might take Brown a little bit longer to work back in, and lack of gelling, a lack of continuity. That's why it might be helpful for the Buffalo Bills, full circle here, to have OJ Howard on hand to run some 12 personnel and to keep some guys at the line of scrimmage, to chip away at some guys, to give Josh Allen some time to throw the football. We haven't expressed too much concern. Thus far, but like Josh Allen's thrown a ton of picks this training camp. Josh Allen's looked flustered this training camp, but like 99.9% of us can all agree that most likely it is because of just how bad that offensive line has been in front of them. As we mentioned at the top of the show, they had to pull the defensive starters on the defensive line today because the offense couldn't do anything. They couldn't function. John DeMarchi brings up Tevin Jenkins. This is something we were talking about in the Cover One Slack channel right before I came on the show. We were super high on him pre-draft process. Yep. He slipped to the second round because of back injuries. Then he missed all of training camp last year because of that back injury. He had surgery, missed the start half of the season. Then he kicked between left tackle and left guard last year. They brought Jason Peters in. He didn't get a lot of playing time. He kicked inside for a little bit. To me, this screams the new Chicago regime is not digging his medicals. Do you have any thoughts on the Tevin Jenkins report from today?
I mean, when a team like that, who is one of probably the worst offensive lines in the NFL, is considering moving from that guy, that's major red flags to me. So is he worth a flyer? Of course. But I think to have super high hopes for a guy like that, given the situation he would be coming from, is red flags to me. So, it would be one of those things where you really just have to align your expectations with what it is. And it's a high, like medical red flags everywhere. And so, I didn't read too much into it because I don't think it's realistic necessarily for the Bills, but I also wouldn't rule it out completely. But I kind of just dismissed it because I just don't think it's a possibility.
He was a Bills top 30 visit, but then the Bills passed and he slipped in the second round. To me, it screams medical. So I love the player. If I'm a guy, if I was an NFL GM, I would totally trade a 7th round draft pick for Tevin.
Oh Jenkins. Yeah, I would do that.
But
I would do that. Yeah.
If that's, obviously we don't know what it would take. It probably would take more than that. 5th rounder, pick swap in the 4th round, something of that nature. It's my guess is what Chicago's probably looking for. But like if they were looking for a 6th or 7th rounder, I personally would do that. But I know that NFL GMs, even 7th round picks, they like covet them. I think they covet them a little bit too much, but they do. And Brandon Beane likes his draft capital. So if he has concerns over Tevin Jenkins' long-term prognostication, I don't think he's going to pull the
especially when we're dealing with like as many injuries as are. Do you want to add another injury question mark to the mix? It's like, I mean, I don't know. It's tough.
All right, on to the defensive line, which is a lot more fun to talk about. Talking about here positional battles and guys who are trying to make the 53. Along the defensive line, it seems pretty cut and dry. The Bills are going to go from 11 to 9, and it's going to be Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle. Boom, we're done. Let's move on. But Brandon Bryant has been here for a couple of years now. He knows the Buffalo Bills defensive system. He's had some good days at training camp. Joe B shouted him out today. Mike Love has been here for years. Even in the regular season when he's had an opportunity, he's popped. he has had a couple of good reports from some of the beat guys. He's made his way into a couple of articles. Is it possible that it's not as cut and dry as it looks along the defensive line? Could Brandon Bryant or could Mike Love convince the Bills to keep a 10th or an 11th guy along the defensive line?
Yeah, they could. I mean, there's two scenarios I could see play out. One more likely than the other.
Mm-hmm.
The less likely one, they do only keep 9, and maybe a guy like maybe Shaq Lawson's the odd man out, and somehow Mike Love makes it over Shaq Lawson. I don't think that's likely. So just
that thought has crossed my mind.
It is a low possibility, but it is possible. I think out of all the guys there, that would be the guy that you could probably slide Mike Love in for.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that you kind of want to have 5 and 5, at least in my mind, that's what I would want. If you were going to keep 10, then it would be Brandon Bryant as the 10th guy with your 5 edges and your 5 interior. And the reason I say that is because you can get a little creative with some of those other interior guys if you're kind of thinking about pass rush like Boogie Bash and whatever. So yes, Mike Love. It's a Mike
Love podcast. So
now the most likely is that they just keep 9 and Mike Love and Brandon Bryant both don't make the team. As good of a story as they've been,
because they could probably also both go on the practice squad.
Yes, exactly. So scenario most likely neither make the team. Maybe second most likely one of them makes the team and they don't replace one of the other 9, and then maybe the least likely would be a surprise if like maybe a guy like Mike Love makes the roster over Shaq Lawson, which again not likely. Eli Anku as well.
He brings a skill set no one else has either with that big wide body.
I've liked him as well. I actually like him a little more than Brandon Bryant, just overall from the body of work. But again, going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for all of these guys. So I still think 9 as of right now.
Yeah. I'm with you. Looking at linebacker again, since like the second day of training camp, both me and you have been fixated on Edmonds, Milano, Dotson, Bernard, Medikevich, Spector. And again, it seems pretty cut and dry, especially with the Andre Smith suspension. Are there any hopes for Joe Giles Harris or Markel Lee here?
Are there hopes? Yeah. There's hopes, and I mean, I'm sure Randy is hoping for that as well. He doesn't want Balin Spector anywhere near this roster. Yeah, I mean, that's a rookie 7th rounder, Joe Giles Harris, who's played in the leagues, been with Jacksonville, been with the Bills. Markel Lee's played special teams for the Raiders, and has been with the Bills now as his second stint. So with that Andre Smith suspension, yeah, that's not a lock, I don't think, by any means. I'd like to see Spector win that spot, but I don't think it's a lock. I think any one of those 3 guys could end up being that 6th linebacker.
I actually think Markel Lee has a better chance than Joe Giles Harris. Chris Jenke said, hey, there's something to be said about guys that Brandon Beane brings back, and he's brought Markel Lee back multiple times. And if you go back and you go to Pro Football Reference and you look at snap counts from last year, Markel Lee was the Tyrell Dodson of the LA Raiders. Their snap counts on special teams were nearly identical, and he had about 40 less snaps on defense. So, with Andre Smith being the guy who's the odd man out here because of his suspension, and you're looking to fill that special teams role that Andre Smith played last year, which is pretty much just a special team specific role. If Balin Spector isn't doing what needs to be done on special teams, Markel Lee has been there, done that in this league on special teams. So I think he could slide in there. Defensive back depth, I think, got interesting today. We have been talking on this show, hey, it's Cam Lewis versus Nick McLeod for CB9/10, depending on whether Trey White is active week 1 or not. But, and the reason for that was me and you are both reading articles. Cam Lewis had 2 pass breakups today. Nick McLeod had an interception today. A name we hadn't seen in any articles up to this point was Christian Benford, the Buffalo Bills 6th-round pick out of Villanova. What does Christian Benford get today, even though we hadn't heard his name at all over the first 7 days of training camp? first team starting cornerback reps against Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis in practice. So even though Cam Lewis and Nick McLeod have been the flashy ones, the ones that have drawn the attention of the beat reporters who read the articles that we rely on, it's Christian Benford who maybe has the eye of the coaches, and we just hadn't seen it yet. And that's how you sort of get, I think, maybe these upsets that we weren't expecting to see, at least through the first week of training camp. What are your thoughts? Does maybe draft capital trump years in the system and flashing in the first week of the training camp?
I think Christian Benford is going to, all these guys near the bottom of the roster are going to have chips on their shoulder, right? Nick McLeod had come back from major injuries, played at 2 major college programs, has kind of steadied himself on the Bills, after kind of getting snatched by the Bengals, I believe it was, and now back with the Bills. And Cam Lewis obviously has kind of been with the Bills as well. But Benford, Division II, right? FCS, whatever, Villanova, 15 interceptions, I think, in his career there. So he knows how to get his hands on the ball. He's not like the top end athlete necessarily as some of those other guys, but I think that from a mentality standpoint, he's not going to be fazed by anything. He's going to have probably the biggest chip on his shoulder of any of those guys, just based on the path that he's going to have to take to try to make this team. And I really think that he's not going to be afraid. I mean, with a guy who has 15 picks, is probably one of the best players on his team, if not the best player on his team in college. That doesn't happen by accident, even at that level. Like, you don't get that many interceptions by accident. So he has a face tattoo, so he has that dog in him, and I mean that alone should give him some credence. But look, I like Christian Benford. I'd like the pick when we made it. I think that he's obviously going to get burnt. He's going to be burnt toast a few times in camp. And I'd like to think he does. I don't know if there's been reports of him doing that yet, but from a physical stature, Douglas, I think or at least I've kind of thought that it is possible. I think we both have thought it is possible that could be an option for him. That's, if it doesn't work out first at corner.
Yeah. So that was one of the first things we talked about when we drafted him, because we had double dipped at corner, was a lot of the draft profiles that you read about Christian Benford, because there wasn't a lot of stuff to watch on him. Was a lot of the people who really, had the ability to watch him said, like, this guy's got, he's a ball hawk. He's got a knack for the ball. He's the kind of guy who could move to safety. He hasn't moved to safety yet, at least not that I've read.
Yep.
It's been Nick McLeod who's gotten the reps at safety. One of the things that was also mentioned about Christian Benford was his special teams ability too. So that'll be something really interesting to see in the preseason, where Christian Benford is lining up on teams. Maybe he gets some reps at first team gunner. If Christian Benford is the first gunner off the bench, on August 13th when we play the Colts, and he's one of the first guys gunning on special teams on a punt, that's going to be super interesting. I do think this is the year the Bills keep 10 DBs.
I'll make a bold prediction right now. In the preseason, Christian Benford will force a turnover on special teams as a gunner.
Interesting. He's going to have the Marquez Stevenson preseason this year, where he's going to do something that makes him uncuttable. I think we keep 10 DBs this year. I think that's I'm feeling that's one of my confidence takes. I can't picture a world where the Bills cut all these dudes: Cam Lewis, Nick McLeod, and Christian Benford. I just can't do it. All right. Last but not least on our position battle list here, punter. The only man I trust to judge punters is Joe Buscaglia. So I skip over the paragraphs in everyone else's articles. No offense to them. I only read what Joe B has to say about punters. Joe B's been doing this for a long time now. He understands what Puntapalooza is. He understands what Puntapalooza is all about. He says Araiza has won the past 2 days in the Puntapalooza battle. Although the hang time is still not as good as Matt Haack's. It's still a little bit behind, but it's improving. But his punts have gone about 5 yards further, and Joe B said that it's just looked better. Araiza has looked better the past 2 days, so he's getting hot. He's been solid on all of his holds. He hasn't messed up a single hold yet. We breathing a little bit easier that Matt Haack's days as a Buffalo Bill are numbered.
Yeah. Oh, I've been breathing easy since the draft pick. Like, I mean,
I'm the worrier here. I'm the one who worries.
And John's right. Holder Palooza is the real batter. Like, we know Araiza is going to be, from a purely kicking standpoint, punting standpoint, he's the guy, right? That's going to be better. Holding is the key here. We went through those issues with Bojorquez, which is why we ended up bringing in Haack. So if Araiza's got that down and there's really been no issues in camp, then he's going to be the guy. Like we've said before, the Bills weren't afraid to go with Tyler Bass over a proven veteran, Steven Hauschka, even though Hauschka was on the decline, but field goal kicking more important than punting. I guess when you factor holding in, it maybe the position is as important, but it's Araiza, and I'm not worried about